Tomás Miguel is a London-based visual effects graduate working as a customer support engineer at Foundry. Tomás left Portugal to pursue a VFX education in London. University taught him the core skills of the VFX pipeline, and he specialized in his favorite, texturing. Becoming a texture artist was his career goal until Foundry, a creative software development company, offered him the opportunity to contribute to the industry standard texturing software called Mari. Before joining Foundry, he worked as a runner in a VFX powerhouse and shares his experience working towards in-house development. Throughout this episode, Tomás also discusses aligning your career with personal creative projects and other goals. Join us to learn more about VFX, how Tomás made it from Portugal to a career in London with no prior background, and get inspired to overcome unexpected obstacles in your way. Enjoy! Hello Tomás, thank you for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Hello Tomás, good to be here. How do you say your name?
Tomás as well.
Tomás, okay, awesome.
Can you briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure, briefly. So I'm Tomás, I'm from Portugal, made it to London for university to study visual effects, and I'm interested in a bunch of different film-related stuff, just want to create cool visual stuff. So yeah, exploring a bunch of different things, exploring different parts of the industry, and yes, been a good time so far here in London.
Let's maybe start with your beginning. Why did you decide to move to London in the first place? Or why did you pick university in London?
Yeah. Well, I guess first of all, in Portugal, there seems to be a bit of romanticizing of London somehow. Maybe you've seen the same as well. But yeah, obviously there's not that much of a film industry in Portugal, especially not visual effects. And back then, I knew I wanted to do something visual with films, but I wasn't sure what. I wanted stability. There was a bunch of values and goals in my mind in terms of where I want to go from here as a 17-year-old. And I found out about VFX and I was like, this is great. I'm good with computers. I'm good with creative software. And I can just sit down. Someone gives me something cool to do. I do it and I send it over. And I was like, hell yeah. So I just started looking around, and London obviously has the most film industry, I would assume, from Europe. Didn't want to go too far to get started, too far away. And yeah, in Portugal, we have this thing called OK Student. It's a company that helps students go to the UK to study. So that was a big influence. And yeah, London, there's like a lot of people to meet, a lot of culture, a lot of good music. And I just wanted to grow and learn about life. So here I am.
So looking back, was it a good decision to pick London?
Yes, I think in spite of all the tribulations along the way, I won't have chosen otherwise because I am getting where I want to be. I'm growing how I want to grow. So I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah, sounds good. And why did you pick the university you picked? Based on what?
Well, based on this company called OK Student, really, because as a 17-year-old kid, you don't really know much about the world at all, really. So you just trust the grown-ups sometimes when it's time to trust the grown-ups. I remember having the interview with the person from there and telling them what I like and stuff. And I think if I had ordered things slightly differently, I would have ended up somewhere very different as well, because I was kind of between a film course and a VFX course. And the other thing I was into was just being the person creating the image, so like being on the camera. And she kind of sent me some cameraman or like more being on set kind of courses, but didn't appeal to me. But if she had said, oh, there's a thing called director of photography, I'll live in, hell yeah, let's do that. But she told me about visual effects, and that's how I ended up at Middlesex. She told me that was a course here. It was in London, which is something I was very interested in terms of just being in that industry and just exploring something with a lot to do in, a big city with a lot to do in. So that's how I ended up in Middlesex University in good old Hendon.
I must say that my journey is pretty much similar. There was also like company that helps students to go abroad. I didn't have any idea, so I kind of trusted people who have experience in this and picked very similar as you do. So something I can relate to for sure.
Yeah, it's a plunge, it's a leap of faith, right?
Yeah. And such coincidences that could have ended up completely differently. but in the end, I ended up like this. And yeah, I would say great mindset and what you said. So how do you look back at the experience at university? Did you enjoy it? Did you learn a lot?
Yeah, I very much enjoyed it. Very much learned a lot. Quite chaotic. I'd say, looking forwards, when you're first starting uni and coming to London, you're like, oh, this is going to be extremely high grade. And it was in many ways, especially in the terms of the hardware and the facilities. But obviously, there's a lot of gaps in something like visual effects. It's hard to be able to, for a few teachers to be able to cover every part of it. So I think looking back, what I learned the most was to learn on my own, which I suppose is what uni is all about, making something of yourself. Because another thing I didn't expect was for there to be a lot of people that were just, oh, these look cool. So here I am hanging out, going to uni parties, and I'm there like, I'm going to rule the world, So it's really about what you make out of it. That's what I learned the most, and how to learn on your own and how to connect with the right people and just be in the right circles and all those kind of things.
Yeah,
it was really valuable.
I would say that is, again, something I can relate to. That university can teach you something, but then it's really about what you do in your free time, how proactive you are, networking and kind of finding your way into the industry in advance and not waiting you graduate and film industry is waiting for you or something.
Exactly. I think something that helped me in my early days was the most overinflated teenager ego that was like, you're gonna go all the way, so just, you got this, it's gonna happen, so just make it happen no matter what. So yeah, that really helped at the start anyways. Then the ego's gotta go.
I think it's kind of everyone in the first year, and then over some time you find out that it doesn't really mean anything that you study that.
Yeah, in a way you're right. The degree in the end doesn't mean so much. It's about the portfolio and the people you know and just the actions you really take. Yeah, something else I was going to say.
And especially if you consider how competitive the industry is, so it's actually very hard to succeed or find a career or just stand out of crowd and out of so many people.
Yeah, for sure. I always try to be realistic and realize that for me to go from point A to point B doesn't seem that clear or that there's a path set out for me. So I'm going to have to remove all the obstacles myself. So that's something I was focused on and just try to be worthy of whatever I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah. And out of curiosity, how many students were there in your class in the first year?
In the first year?
Film.
Yeah, I remember film at Middlesex was a couple hundred or something.
When I started, I think there were maybe like 70, but the following year, I think there were like 120. And I would say the year after, there were probably even more. So it was getting more and more.
That's weird, but okay. Yeah, in my course, it was a new course as well. I was the second class ever.
Really? So the course was like newly started?
Yeah. So it made for the experience as well because we were kind of the guinea pigs, but it was nice as well because I got to be the student voice leader, student learning assistant, and just kind of help the course figure itself out a little bit. But yes, in my course, I think we started with about 25 people. By the third year, we were something like 12, I think. And out of those, I think, I could be wrong, but I think only me and two other guys, which from the start were obviously the most interested ones, are the only ones that are working in 3D or visual effects or something related to the course.
Oh, that's not many out of those that started.
Yeah, I'm sure the others are still doing great things and all that, but yeah, that's a little eye-opener for those out there getting started.
Yeah. Do you think it's because, as we spoke before, it's so hard to get out there, or didn't enjoy the course, or it's about the people that they don't really put themselves out there or don't work hard?
Yeah, I think visual effects and film and most creative industries, enterprises require you to become your own brand. It's not like, okay, you're a lawyer or, okay, let's use a doctor. a doctor, you learn all the things as long as you memorize them and understand them. Now you can go help people. And they're the grade matters. The grade you get matters, but everyone's kind of the same thing. There's obviously different specializations, but everyone's a doctor. Everyone can do the same thing. While in visual effects, it's no one can teach you how to really become what you need to become. That's something you've got to figure out a bit on your own and specialize. And there's a lot of factors that go into it. You got to know what the industry needs, what you want to do, what you have at your disposal. So yeah, at the end of the day, I think a lot of people just go through the motions, while other people are like, how do I, as I said, make myself worthwhile of this company's time or whatever I want to be doing. So yeah, I think it's really about what you're making of yourself. You got to have something to show. You got to have some specific skills, valuable skills you're developing, showing off and showing that you have unique in some way, but also can get the job done. So also like fit into whatever job role you're aiming for. You know what I mean?
Yes. And can you briefly introduce the content of the course? Because I wonder if it's like that in the beginning, you were learning basics, then you picked specialization, and maybe what was like, final work in the last year? I'm curious.
Yeah, of course. No, that's a good point. For visual effects, typically, and in my course, which I think now they're going to merge it with the games course, but I think it's going to follow the same kind of structure where in the first year, you kind of dip your toes in a bunch of different things, learn a bunch of different stuff, and just learn how to be a generalist, I suppose. And in our case, in the first year, the final project was remaking visual effects shot from a movie or something. So I chose Stranger Things. It was just like a room with a guy freaking out, and then the room turns into a upside down kind of environment.
It was like interesting assignment.
Yeah, it's good fun, and you get to play around, and it doesn't have to be perfect, so it's good. The second year for us was making a creature and putting it into a live shot. So I just made a chimpanzee and put it hanging on a tree from the university. And on our third year, that's when you specialize and you just choose something that you want to explore and learn more about. And you do a feasibility study in the first semester where you do basically the project you want to do, but at a smaller scale. So instead, for me, I wanted to focus on texturing and a bit of modeling. So I wanted to do a whole street in CG, just a normal street, but based on a specific one from Vietnam that just looked really cool. So I did one building, basically. And you learn what the software you need to do, what the workflow looks like, and then you just apply it at a bigger scale. And there you go, you have portfolio in theory.
Honestly, that sounds interesting. It sounds like fun, these projects.
There wasn't a lot of exams or written papers. Essays, yeah, sorry.
Did you write
No,
or not at all?
There was like 1 or 2 per year, short ones as well. Obviously, there's the final dissertation, but there was no exams, nothing else. It's pretty hands-on, which I really liked. I've never been a traditional school kind of guy.
I have to admit that it sounds like you promote it quite well. If I was decided, I would go for it because it sounds...
Yeah, as long as you can make the most out of it yourself, you can't just, go with the flow. You got to take,
Yeah. And did you do also look development after texturing?
Yeah. They kind of go hand in hand. Typically, you model a 3D asset and then you texture it, you paint its surface to make it look photorealistic. And then once you have those images done, you bring it into a renderer where you basically create the highest quality final image that looks realistic. When you're applying those images from texturing into the shader in rendering, that's basically making it look right in the final render, to make it look accurate in terms of how light works and stuff. So yeah, that goes hand in hand. So it's something I explored as well.
And what were, for example, some other disciplines that you could have specialized in?
I think I always went towards texturing. That was when it came to the third year or end of second year. And I was thinking, what do I want to focus my efforts on? What is going to get me to where I want to be was the real question. Going to get me to a place where I'm growing in an interesting company, making cool stuff, making good money, obviously, all those things, and that I'm obviously enjoying myself. So what kind of ticks off all those boxes? It actually made a lot of sense for me back then, because there was other things like creatures. Creating creatures is obviously potentially the coolest thing you can do in visual effects, creating the characters, right? But precisely because of that, it's extremely competitive. You need to know a lot about anatomy, so you should know how to draw. You don't need to, but it helps if you know how to draw. And you need to know pretty specific software like ZBrush, and it's just a rabbit hole. Whilst in texturing, I felt already way more comfortable and that I could get started as a junior or something like characters. Big companies don't tend to hire juniors to create the characters, which, a bit sad, but it sounds reasonable actually. So I went more towards what made the most sense for me, because before university, I also did a vocational course, I guess is what you'd call it. So the last 3 years of mandatory school, year 10 to 12, instead of just being regular maths and Portuguese and history, you do that, and the other half of the day, you're learning an actual job. And for me, it was digital arts and mediums, is what you'd call it, I suppose. So I was doing everything from photography, video editing, grading, some 3D and visual effects, sound engineering, all these different things. So I was very visual and very capable of creating images. So I wanted to blend that with the 3D side of it. So it actually made a lot of sense for me.
Yeah, that's understandable. And for example, were there also disciplines such as anim, FX, comp, environment, and like this?
Do you mean other parts of VFX?
Yes, like other parts of the pipeline. Also like other options that you could pick in the 3D.
Oh, sure, yeah. No, that's a good point. Yeah, there's endless different departments, really. And you gotta more or less focus, decide what you want, realize what you want in the first or early second year. But there's other things like compositing, where you're doing the 2D side of things. So you're editing video, not just cutting the video, but, manipulating the video to change things about it. That can be very long, very interesting, but very long.
Need patience.
Yeah, need patience and, be extremely precise. What else? There's more technical things in 3D, obviously, like rigging, like creating the muscles and the skeleton of the characters. And that's obviously, there's no 3D software that you click a few buttons and it does that for you. You gotta go get in there and, code a bit and paint a bit and break it a bit and fix it again. So didn't want something too technical. What else can I think about?
It's understandable to me. You got a good reason in why you picked what you picked. When it comes to software, can you say what software were you using or were you learning with?
Yeah, we had pretty much a lot to choose from. They tended to lead us towards the things we could get for free as students, so we could use them from home as well. It's a bit of a tricky decision to make there, because we ended up missing out on some important stuff, I think. But obviously, we learned a lot of Maya was our main software in terms of the main 3D environment we were working it, the 3D full package we were working it with. We learned a lot of Houdini in our second year. In terms of texturing, they didn't focus on that too much, so we didn't learn Mari or Substance as part of the course. I learned on my own third year, but it might be different now. So those were our main ones, also Mudbox and a bunch of other things that you just gotta be familiar with, but Photoshop, After Effects, Nuke, there was a lot of Nuke, obviously. So yeah, that's about it. A lot of different softwares, but it's nice because you can, as with this question, the previous one, you can really choose something that you enjoy from a lot of different types of jobs inside VFX.
Yeah. Like from those you mentioned, it sounds good that those are kind of industry standards, aren't they? Maya, ZBrush, Substance Painter, and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. It's tricky with some stuff. Like Substance, I would say, is becoming pretty popular in university courses because it's just easy to get started and to slap some stuff on it and make it look good. But I heard a lot of people saying that recruiters can tell very easily that was done in an hour or whatever. And the students didn't really understand the concepts of texturing behind it. So they couldn't really say, oh, he's ready for the job, even though it looks pretty great, the final asset. Well, something like Mari, which is the main thing I'm working on right now in my current job at the Foundry.
Isn't Mari developed by Meta? Or it's a different one?
I believe that was originally where it was created. And then it got brought over to the Foundry. Yeah.
Because I heard that Meta, the VFX company from New Zealand,
yes,
they kind of developed it, and then it was so good and so popular that the industry started using it.
Yeah, it brought on a lot of new and awesome things. I think it was the first software to allow to paint in 3D. So you're seeing your 3D assets and you're using a paintbrush on it. Whereas before, you had to paint on the UVs. For those that aren't familiar, say you have a box, 3D box, a cube, and you want to paint on it, you have to turn that in flat 2D image. So you just imagine undoing a carton box to be flat, and that's what you get. So people will have to paint on that instead of seeing the actual 3D thing. I didn't know that was the main advantage at the time, but it's still growing and it still is the industry standards.
So it's, I guess, easier now with Mari than it was before?
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's still trickier to get started on, I would say, than Substance Painter. It doesn't come with so many pre-made materials you can just throw into your character and all that, like a skin default or whatever. So people tend to shy away from it, but it really is the most powerful thing. And I think that if you're a texture artist getting started and you never had a job in the industry and you say, you know, Mari, and you can really show it, then you're like so far ahead than the Substance people. They can create cool stuff and you can really be really good in stuff like Substance and make that really worth your while and make it employable. But that is my humble opinion.
No, makes sense. Can you say how you started planning your way into the industry? Because it's something that I think it's not easy. Some people underestimate, but from my experience, I know how hard was it. So how did you start planning start of your career in the third year?
All right, good questions. I think that's really the interesting stuff that people are curious about. So yeah, obviously for visual effects, you need to have a portfolio. It's not about your CV so much or your grades at uni. It's about the stuff you've created and how does it look, and is it created in a way that the visual effects studios created. And it's not just, is it a really epic monster? Like that's not necessarily what they're interested in seeing. I'll say what they're most interested in seeing is basic foundational stuff done extremely well. So if you're like an assets, a 3D assets creator, so you model and texture, if you do a hand extremely well, and you have a picture of the hand that you base it on, like a photo of your hand and a 3D render of the photo you created side to side, and they look great. That's how you get a job, I would say, if you're like doing the portfolio approach. There's many other approaches though, and that's sort of what I did. There's many other things that can help you get into the industry. So you kind of gotta finesse your way in with a variety of approaches is more what I did. And in terms of my personal experience, there's other things worth mentioning. It's never going to be clean, straightforward narrative as you expect. I was like, oh, I'm going to finish my third year, apply, keep applying, and I have a job. And COVID and a bunch of things. Yeah, and during COVID and during third year, I started developing chronic pain in my wrists, in my hands.
Was it from working too much with mouse and computer, or what was that?
That was the thing that aggravated it. For me, in my case, it's called joint hypermobility. So they just tend to be weaker overall, so they just need to be strengthened. That's it. I had to do hand workouts. When something hurts, you stop using it, usually, in your body. You just give it a break. In my case, that was the wrong thing to do because it's just getting weaker, so it's just starting to hurt more. And yeah, the public healthcare in London, in terms of musculoskeletal problems, can be not very helpful. It just took me a long time to figure that out. So you got to be aware that you're going to have to take side tracks and go do something else for a while and just grow in other ways, because you got to have all your foundations ready to go if you're going to attack this industry or whatever, you know. if you really want to get in, you want to make something of yourself, you got to take care of yourself as well.
Just a quick one. If you enjoy our podcast, please give us a review on your favorite podcast app, subscribe or share it with your friends. For more information, visit the show notes. Thank you, and back to the show. So can you continue? It was with your hand?
Yeah, so when things are going to happen to you that you got to figure out besides just your career, obviously, and about your career as well, it's just never going to be straightforward. So yeah, regarding my wrists, my hands, it just took me a while to figure out the way to fix that problem. And I had to put all my focus on that and put VFX and computers aside for a while because I couldn't be on the computers. My hands hurt, obviously, so people take care of that.
So is it okay now?
Yes, it's manageable now.
No, I guess
fine.
not 100%.
Not at the moment because I started this new job, but I got to put the time into it, and there's a lot of things you're going to have to put your time into if you want to make the most out of your experiences in the industry. Other things you wouldn't expect, such as your health, surprisingly. As a teenager, you don't really think about your health that much. You're like, I'm immortal. You just go. But then it catches up to you. So yeah, that was one thing that I had to take a break for about over a year. And then I started working on my portfolio again. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take the traditional way of having a portfolio and just apply. I want to go to a big studio, make some cool stuff. So I got to have something cool to show. And now just doing that while working side jobs, part-time jobs kind of thing. But there's other factors that help you get into the industry, such as who you know. Many people say it's not what you know, it's who you know. And there's some truth to that, obviously, because it's not like you're being handed things on a silver platter, but you're just way more informed and someone can say something nice about you at the company or whatever. So it's really important to just make those connections. And, when I say make those connections, it's not going to fancy events and talking to all these people. It's being nice to everyone around you, really. Not just pass by, say, hey, how are you? Good morning, whatever. And that makes the whole difference. Yeah, I was just catching up with a friend and from uni, from visual effects. And he was a runner. And he told me, hey, we need runners right now, quite desperately. You will definitely get in. You have everything you need. There's obviously some opportunities in here for you. So come on over. So that was how I got the job. And that's how I first started. But I won't say I got into the industry yet because you're not being an artist on the computer. It's more a on your feet kind of job. Just you're more on the facilities team, taking care of the building, setting up meetings, those kind of things, more than you're like being parts of the production of VFX, being creative or anything of that sort. Still very valuable, obviously. But how I actually got desk job, which is what I was aiming for in visual effects, was, well, we can go more deeply into that. But as a runner, really trying to create a stronger development program for us. And that was very messy, very political, all these kind of different things. But it was really cool because we really got to push for something in a big company and try to create something awesome for us and for everyone who comes afterwards. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out in that way, but we got to meet a lot of people and get a lot of connections and learn a lot of actual VFX in the meantime in terms of mentorship and people helping us out and things like that. I did get offered a job there that I applied for at this company in data services, which wasn't, I would learn a lot of things and it was a pretty decent job, but it wasn't quite as valuable as other things. So again, how I actually got into the industry was by talking to a lot of people, telling them what was going on, my situation. I can't be at this company for much longer because the contract was finishing and they don't want to renew it, not just for me, but for everyone else in my team. And I was just talking with a friend of mine from university, actually. And again, he said, hey man, there's actually this position at my company, which is customer support engineer. So you will be helping visual effects studios and artists figure out their problems they're having in Maui, which is the texturing software that I was interested in learning more about and I had been using for the past year or so. So you just get to learn a lot about this software. You get to help people, get to know some people, and really go deep into texturing. And I think you'll get in because you have all the skills that it takes from being a runner, from having all these more customer-oriented jobs, and from how you do VFX. So again, I applied for that and I got in. So I'm at Foundry now and I'm very happy here. And that's the short version of how I got into the industry.
So does it mean you are helping to develop the program?
Partially. I'm not a software engineer. It's more about the current user experience of the customers, like studios, how they're trying to use the software, what's not working, is there bugs, do they have any feature requests, things they would like to see in the future, and I communicate that to the software engineers. So I'm more the bridge between the customers and the engineering team.
So is it something that you plan to continue doing, or is still like your end goal become texture artist or VFX artist in general?
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't know this job existed in the first place. And it's pretty cool. So, you got to keep an open mind and explore different kinds of opportunities and see how they align with your final goal, whatever that is. For me, I'm trying to create the least resistance between the present moment and between the future me that is happy and growing and has all the good foundations of life, like a healthy body, healthy mind, good connections, good people around me, and that I'm able to have a creative output. I'm able to put some cool stuff out there. So, this actually works really well for me. And there's a lot of potential to develop at the company, whether in customer support or other things like being product specialists, for example. You're just really getting to explore the software and show it for people the best way of using them, things like that. My main goal has been for a long time being a texture artist because that aligned with my goals of just having a stability and being able to create some cool stuff. But this also offers me a lot of different opportunities towards a happy future. So I am very down to stay here a very long time doing this kind of jobs at this company, which is absolutely lovely. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Honestly, I don't know much about the company. So does it also develop other popular softwares, or is it focused only on Mari?
So it's called Foundry. They do Nuke as well, which is the main compositing software in visual effects and for any other compositing needs. They do a bunch of other stuff like Modo is their kind of full-featured 3D package. Katana, which is for lighting, look dev, and rendering, especially at big studios, at complex pipelines, and a bunch of others. So yeah, it's not the big software companies, if not the biggest necessarily. Not sure actually, but
yeah, something like Adobe, for example, just smaller.
Yeah, it's Adobe, but it's more focused in VFX, for example.
Is it London-based?
Yeah, it started in London. It's pretty much around the world right now, but the headquarters are still here. So it's good to be here once again.
Yeah, glad to hear that you enjoy it, and sounds good.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And as we discussed VFX quite a lot, can you try briefly to describe VFX pipeline? Maybe for someone who doesn't know anything about VFX, to get an idea what we are talking about.
All right, here I go. The classic.
Like, in general, something not too complex.
Of course. So yeah, I didn't know VFX existed until I started on it. So it's a very valid question. So visual effects is everything that you see on a movie, a show, an advertisement that isn't real, that wasn't captured on the camera. That's the simplest way possible to describe it. That can mean, for example, the director is they shot the movie, they can't go back to shooting again, and he's like, you know what, I don't like the sky. Let's change the sky. But there's actors in front of the sky and trees and stuff, so someone needs to go frame by frame and paint out the sky so they can replace with something else. That's called rotoscoping. There's 3D creatures, monsters, there's magic. There's all these things that happen on the computer. They are not made on set. That's what visual effects is. And it takes a lot more people and skill and technical prowess than you'd maybe expect. It's really an awesome and complex industry. But at the same time, it's a lot of people, but also quite small. It's great.
Can you say your favorite VFX, either in specific films or specific assets? What you like, what you find interesting, impressive?
Yeah, I would say, to be honest, someone who's into VFX, you'd expect them to be into the most flashy and complex and crazy kind of thing. Like Marvel, obviously, is a good example. But I like when visual effects is more invisible, only used discreetly. It could be like the whole sequence, the whole shot you're looking at is fully 3D, fully fake, but it's very subdued, like a Dune movie that came out in a year ago, a couple of years ago. It's a beautiful use of it, I would say. I'll say my favorite VFX is the VFX that's only used when it needs to be used. That is not just trying to take the show and create something. It can have awesome results as well sometimes, like what's that movie? Everything Happening Everywhere All at Once.
The Oscar winner.
Yeah, Oscar winner. That's extremely hilarious use of VFX and really well used. I think my favorite VFX, I would say, is the ones that are well directed, well used, with well thought out with the director of photography. What we actually need to do shouldn't be just a cop out, just an easier way of adding more control. I think it's about, can this help us create something more beautiful? And something like Dune is one of my favorite examples because it's just so discreet and mature, but at the same time, it requires so much effort and skill from the visual effects artists.
Yeah, I can only agree. I went to cinema to watch it and it was so beautiful. Amazing film. Definitely worth watching on a big screen.
Oh, hell yeah. I'm going for number 2 this year.
Yeah, looking forward as well. And have you watched Avatar, second one? Because it just won the Academy Award. Have you watched it?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, of course I went to watch it in the cinema. I wouldn't be able to call myself a VFX artist otherwise.
It was beautiful, wasn't it?
It was beautiful and extremely realistic and very well used VFX, very smart how it was done. You know, I didn't research it too much, but I think I heard that there was quite a few shows that you thought were CG avatars, characters, but it was just people painted blue, you know, like real people. So that's really smart. But it's one of those tricky things because it's a beautiful movie. It's just visual effects prowess is amazing, but the plot is the most American standard thing possible you could think of. Is it worth it? If you're trying to make money, is like, but if you're trying to feel something, it's like, it was great regardless, very enjoyable. You know, you still emote to it, but it felt a bit empty at times. And I think that's the trap that people fall for very easily, of having something that looks so realistic, but it's fake. And it's like, this is so worthy, this is so valuable, but it's not the main thing when it comes to making a movie necessarily, you know? There's a lot more to consider.
But it seems like it worked if you look at the box office.
Yep, and isn't that the problem? Not the problem necessarily. I'm very glad it exists, but everything comes down to money in the end, and that's something we always need to take into consideration. Whatever industry you're in, it's going to happen, that fact. And yeah, because, you know, people get into this industry because you tell me what you think, but people just want to make cool images. That's it. That's why you get in. You want to make something that looks great, that feeds your teenager edgy soul, and that's it. And it can be very easy to get pulled and let me take a step back. You know you want to do this and you want to be part of something great. It's very easy to get pulled into a very tiny piece of that great thing where you are creating something awesome, but it's like someone else's something awesome. You don't necessarily have so much creative input on. So I think that's something people need to consider. How do you want to, if you're really passionate about movies and that's why you're getting in, okay, when or how are you going to have that creative output? When are you going to have something that you're proud of and it's what you wanted to create? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You tell me.
I was going to say that I understand what you're saying, but I think it's like a part of a bigger picture. If you look at the whole film, there are so many people working on it, so many variables, and such a big and complex project. Yeah. So I think you as artist, you get your job, you understandably cannot really pick what you're going to work on. I think you should really try to do your best. And
hell yeah,
movie may not be, the best one in the end, but still your asset can be like the best one out of the movie, and you're the one who appreciates it. And I would say regular people, they probably will not appreciate it because obviously your goal is to make it realistic so they don't really notice. But then it's about you, and you know that you did your best, your asset looked great, and like you did what you could, and the rest you don't really have influence over it. So tricky.
Yeah, 100%. And I will still like to have my credits on a movie. On a
Oh
big
yeah,
movie.
definitely.
For no good reason. It's just, come on, gotta fit my ego. Come on.
Everyone wants that, or at least once in a life, just sit in a cinema and see your name when the credits roll.
Yeah, see that one?
Then you can tick the box.
Yeah, exactly. Put it on LinkedIn, move on.
Yeah.
Get a house in the Bahamas.
And what about some of your favorite TV series? Have you got some, either when it comes to VFX or not VFX?
I would say my favorite piece of visual media ever is this cartoon called Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I've never seen that, but I heard about it.
Well, I highly recommend it. I mean, Netflix is making an adaptation right now, which might be worth watching. But I think there's a lot to be learned in there in terms of how to make piece of entertainment, a movie or whatever you want to call it. And why I like it, there's just so many elements. There's the elements, obviously, like people are bending the elements like fire, water, air, earth. And people are fighting using that. And that's just such a visually stunning thing. There's so many opportunities to use, especially something like fire will affect the lightning in the scene. So you can create really beautiful stuff, especially if there's people with different colors of fire and a thing like red or blue, and just great shots. And it's just wholesome to watch it because there's a lot of traveling and exploring, and it's not as crazy as you expect from a kids show. It's more, you just sit down and you're going through this journey with this group of people, and the characters, it's a kind of a fighting kind of cartoon, like Naruto or whatever, but the characters don't look all jacked up with all these fancy outfits. They're just kids, that are trying to do their best. So it has this kind of subdued look while also looking awesome at the right times and having a great plot. I think it just teaches you a lot in terms of what's a good piece of art, really. And especially this kind of art we're trying to create as part of the film industry.
Are there still new episodes coming out, or is it finished?
So, yeah, this was made in like 2004 or something. There was like 3 seasons. There was a sequel, also a TV show for a while. And now they're picking back up, and they're going to make a few series and a few movies animated. And there's also the Netflix adaptation, live adaptation coming out. So there's going to be a lot of value coming out of that. There's a lot of the original people involved. So I'm very excited to see what's coming, but it's still going to take a little while.
And if I'm not wrong, isn't there also film from year maybe 2005 from M. Night?
We don't talk about that.
So, I was going to say that I think it was a flop. So
yeah, I mean, if you will learn a lesson on what not to do, by all means, go watch it after you watch the cartoon, because it's so underwhelming.
I honestly don't remember it. I think I watched it years ago. But what's the reason that it's not really worth watching?
Well, I think I watched the whole thing also 10 years ago or something, and 3 years ago or something, I was like, I'm going to give this another try. And I stopped half an hour in or something because, and I don't think you're ready to compare it to the cartoon, and you don't need to know the cartoon in order to feel this. But what I remember, it just felt very mechanical and like, I don't know, like a cheap action Asian movie. Think of that aesthetic. It was American, but I think you get what I mean. It was a bit soulless, and then there was like the main reason people watch it is a sense of journey, adventure, and then the fighting with the elements. There was such beautiful animation being created there, and just ideas and just ways of fighting and how it relates to the characters, because if you're fire, you're fueling it from anger. If you're like, your thing is air, you try to evade a lot and be light on your feet and move around and just deflect your enemy's attacks and use them against him. Well, that's for water. But you know what I mean? There's a whole story that goes with it. The moment I stopped last time watching, when I closed the movie, was when there's this kind of fight scene with like a lot of different people. It's like the oppressed and the oppressors kind of thing, and the oppressor rebelling. And there's 5 guys. They're like earthbenders, so they move rocks and they throw them around, and they can be like really punchy and dynamic, and that's like really awesome to see. And you just see them making all these karate kind of moves and going like I'll climb up them together, and they're about to throw something, and you just see like a medium-sized rock slowly moving in the air. And you're like, okay, there's nothing here for me.
Yeah.
I think that's a great example. And I think the effects were pretty decent, but a good example of what not to do.
Yeah, it's something we don't probably recommend to watch. I think actually I probably watched it just because I don't really know the series as much as you do, but I think I watched it maybe just because of the director. That he's famous. I'm not saying that, some of his films are good, some were a bit worse, but I think I was curious and wanted to watch it because of him.
Yeah.
And yeah, probably wasn't really worth it. But anyway. What about the assets? Have you got like a favorite or some super cool asset that you would want to work on? For example, something from one of your favorite films or something?
Yeah, I'll say that if I were to be an artist again, will be the Netflix adaptation of Avatar. Not to press the same button, but it really is. If it does end up being good, and they're going to be making a few seasons, so it's going to be produced for a few years, I would like to get around to being a part of that at some point. Like just making the worlds and the characters as a lot of animals that are like a mix of different animals, so it looks really interesting. The buildings, the architecture is really beautiful stuff. Or, something like Dune, where it's pretty simple but elegant, just something where you can really make something special out of it, I would say, rather than just follow reference necessarily.
Yes, something where you can use also a bit of your own creativity, I guess.
Yeah, where there's a brief, there's something you gotta achieve that the director wants, but how you communicate that is a little bit more up to you.
Yeah, and especially if it's part of such a great film as Dune.
Yeah.
Sounds like a dream project, I would say.
Yeah, it would be pretty cool. But again, my current position, which is helping to create the software that then goes into making all this cool stuff. If I can make these as effortless and as fun for the artist as possible, that's also a dream come true, because then you can see the results of your efforts as well into many, many movies.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because everyone's using that software.
I know you mentioned, I think, Substance Painter, but is there like a software that is a big competitor of the one that you are working on?
Yeah, I'd say the Substance package is the main competitor against Mari. I think it depends on the industries, but in visual effects, Mari has a very, very strong grip because it's just extremely powerful in terms of how much data it can handle, how big the asset, how high quality, how much resolution. It's just, there's nothing like it. So,
is it because you work there, or is it objective opinion?
It's subjective opinion. And I started with Substance. That's how I first learned texturing. And it certainly has its advantages. I was doing that for a few years, and when I moved to Mari, I was like, it's not as fun. It felt very obscure and very technical. But once you get the hang of it, it's so much better. Because it's so much more control and power and create new things. Tick all the same boxes that Substance ticks, obviously. But yeah, that's what I'm focusing on for sure for the future.
And what's the learning curve like? Is it difficult to learn it? Is it same as the other softwares? Because I assume it takes time and patience to learn it.
All of them are like that in visual effects. All of them takes time, and they're temperamental, and they have history. So you gotta treat it in a special way somehow. Don't tick that box ever. Don't do this if you're trying to do that. It's lore. There's a lot of lore to these softwares. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'll say for Mari, it is tricky when it starts.
But doable, need to be patient, need to keep learning. And I guess stay open that it will never be perfect, because there's always something to learn, I guess.
Exactly. And nowadays you can learn anything for free, really. Online, there's all the stuff you need to get started. And I think for Mari, as long as you keep exploring and trying new things, you're going to end up with a really cool experience and portfolio and skill.
And you said that when it comes to VFX industry, so what other industries is it being used in? Games?
Yeah, games, product design, people making clothes and stuff. I mean, it's picking up, right? There's a lot of things that used to be done by hand that are being done on the computer now. Fashion is a big example, obviously. So easy to iterate on the computer, obviously, because you can have, one dress, but then apply as many different textures and patterns and things to it within an hour on the computer. and show that to the people who makes the decision, and they're like, I want these, but with these tweaks and stuff. And okay, now you actually make the dress in reality. You save so many materials, like cloths, cotton, all these things. You don't need to waste them in terms of the money and just the, environment itself. And there's things like the metaverse, I don't think that's gonna ever pick up. But
That's the future, isn't it?
no, not for me. I'm an old timer, I'm sorry. We have a whole reality already. You need a second one?
Yeah, like escape or something.
Yeah, it obviously has its advantages here and there, but nah, I think you lose more than you win.
Yeah,
I would say.
Do you actually know, or do you need to know some coding to work with that software?
No, with any of these softwares, not really, for the most part. Some specific jobs like rigging or effect, like making fire and stuff. Yeah, a little, you gotta know some stuff. And obviously, if you know it, you can put it to use in a lot of interesting ways, make it more powerful. But no, which is cool.
Yeah, I agree. Coding always sounded scary for me.
Yeah, daunting.
But it will be impressive if you knew.
I'm working on it.
So I was gonna suggest to finish this and we can do second part at some point in the future if you are interested.
Yeah, I'm very much up for it. And yeah, I would love to talk more about hobbies and, creativity. And also a bit more about how, because I gave the short version, but, things you can do to help your ideas, in terms of getting into the industry and all that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely helpful and something that I would appreciate if I was starting again.
Yeah.
Happy to discuss it next time. Yeah.
That's awesome though.
So thank you very much. And I'll be looking forward to next part.
It's a man. I hope the next fitting you well as well.
Thank you for listening to Produced By. Subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app, leave a review, or send us your feedback. For more information about the host, links from the episode, and ways to connect with us, visit the show notes. If you know someone who would be an ideal guest for our podcast, please get in touch. Thank you and see you soon.